Hi friends, David here from Above AVL and Learn Stage Audio. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is the difference between, gosh, a whole list of items that you might find in a given audio console. Groups, matrices, mixes, VCA or DCA. What in the world do they mean and how can you use them? Let's dive in. All right, so a lot of this comes somewhat to semantics, so let's start in the old days. Okay, on analog sound consoles, and it's a little bit easier to understand, is you basically had a number of ways that you could route a signal or control a signal. First, let's talk about groups. Okay, groups are generally the most simple, where essentially across your console, you would have a group, say this is a group fader instead of the master, okay? And you had, these four channels assigned to that group A, okay? That means that essentially the output of these channels, whatever level they're at, then would go to this group before going to the main output or even being output from the group itself. What's this mean? Well, simply put, it means that as you process sounds, especially if you're sending things out to effects and they're coming back in, you could move the group level and not have the effects moved in proportion. That becomes a problem. The easiest way to solve this, of course, is to just have your effects return also routing to that same group. However, VCAs are what solves that problem better. So on larger analog consoles, generally you had to hit a certain price point. There was something called a VCA, and on pretty much every digital console, except the one that I'm in front of right now, has something called DCAs. A VCA just stands for a voltage controlled amplifier. A DCA is a digitally controlled amplifier. All that it means is, and consoles are going to do this in slightly different ways, but is if this was a DCA or VCA for these faders, as I move the VCA or DCA up or down, the faders would move in proportion to the movement of the VCA or DCA. Why does this matter? This matters because, simply put, if you're going out to things like effects or different mixes on aux sends or mix sends, all of that's going to stay in proportion because instead of a group fader being, like a bucket that all the sound is going to before it comes out, it's simply a remote control. You're simply controlling that fader level from a different fader. Now, different consoles are going to handle this in different ways. Many of them, as you move the VCA or DCA, the fader actually moves. On some consoles, specifically now that we're in the digital realm, they actually don't move the faders when you move the VCA or DCA, but that's what's happening. The level is being adjusted of the fader, even if the fader itself does not move. So what about things like auxes, mixes, matrices? These are all going to be ways that you are able to output and or process sound. One of the problems with a VCA or DCA versus a subgroup in most consoles is that a VCA or DCA doesn't have any processing to it. Now that can be a positive thing if you don't want to process anything, but if you have a group for like drums or vocals, you might want to have some processing on there, some EQ, some multiband EQ, some compression, etc. The way to do that is going to be that you're going to basically need it to go through either a subgroup or a matrix or a mix, which is going to enable that to be processed. Now, essentially when it comes down to it, mixes, auxes, and even matrices, the definition of exactly what it is and how it works is going to vary by console. Generally, it's a mix that you're able to put different channels in and you're able to output from the console. And you might be able to, depending on the specific console and what it can or cannot do, actually put that mix into another mix or matrix. Okay, a lot of times, individual mixes could go into matrices, but not vice versa. But it's really going to depend on your console and how it's set up architecturally. But the key thing is that compared to a DCA, a mix of some sort or an aux or a send or whatever it's called can often have processing and might be able to be put into with individual channels, a matrix which could also potentially have processing and be output. Okay. And so that's a really important way to think when you're setting things up is that mixes that aren't DCAs might be able to be put into matrices and output to a console, to some other feed, to somewhere else that you need sound. Okay. Similarly, the biggest thing is they can be processed together. So you're taking a group of channels, their overall levels are being processed together, and then you might have that controlled by a DCA or something like that. But the biggest key is to be aware of what you're looking to do with your audio and how you want to route it. Okay. Other than that, the rules are going to vary a little bit from console to console in the digital world, and it's important to know. But if you've ever kind of been smacking your head against the wall going, man, I've got this DCA, I want to add processing on the group, why won't it let me? That's why. Meanwhile, most of the other types of outputs, whether auxes, mixes, subgroups, etc., have the ability to add that processing. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something new today. If you did, give us a big old subscribe and head over to aboveavl.com. Next time you need any audio, video, or lighting gear, reach out to us. We want to help. We want to find the perfect thing for you, and we want to get it into your hands. We'll see you guys there. Thanks.